If you've been scrolling through the internet over the past couple of days, you've probably seen a ton of buzz about Edgar Wright's The Running Man adaptation, hitting theaters on November 14th. And honestly, the early reactions coming in are absolutely wild. I've been diving deep into what critics are saying, and I've got to tell you, this film is shaping up to be something truly special. But it's also touching on some seriously controversial territory, so stick around as we break down the first reactions and explore why this might be Hollywood's most talked about revival of the year. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
Welcome to The Running Man! Contestants will be hunted for 30...
Setting the stage, why this adaptation matters. Before we jump into the reactions, let me quickly set the scene for anyone who might not be familiar with the source material. Stephen King wrote The Running Man back in 1982 under his pseudonym Richard Bachman. It's a bleak, dystopian sci-fi novel set in a future United States where the economy's in ruins, violence is everywhere, and the government's basically weaponizing entertainment to control the masses. The story follows Ben Richards, a desperate working-class guy who enters a deadly televised game show called The Running Man, where he has to survive while being hunted by trained killers. Why? Because he needs the prize money to save his sick daughter. It's grim, it's dark, and it's packed with social commentary. Now, here's the thing. We already had a Running Man film back in 1987 with Arnold Schwarzenegger, but King absolutely hated that movie. He was so disappointed with how loosely it adapted his novel that he actually demanded his name be taken off the marketing materials. So when Edgar Wright, the guy who directed Shaun of the Dead and Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, announced he was tackling this project and promised a faithful adaptation, people got excited. And I mean really excited. The overwhelmingly positive reception. Let me walk you through what the critics are actually saying because there's some really solid praise here. Perry Nemiroff from Collider highlighted something that was crucial for King fans. This adaptation actually stays faithful to the source material. But here's what's interesting. She also pointed out that Wright didn't just create a carbon copy of the book. She wrote about how he manages to do so while still making it feel like an Edgar Wright movie, emphasizing that he's got a remarkably firm handle on the style and tone of the film, and that's what allows it to be both bombastic, high-energy fun, and also just grounded enough to ensure you care and take the story home with you after the credits roll. That's the balance I was curious about, right? How do you make Stephen King's bleak dystopian nightmare entertaining without losing the emotional weight? Then you've got Rachel Leischman from The Mary Sue, who basically had a meltdown in the best way possible. She posted that the film was everything I wanted it to be and so much more. Action-packed, emotional, and a star vehicle for Glenn Powell. Edgar Wright really bottled magic with Stephen King's novel, and this is going to be an instant classic. Now, calling something an instant classic is a big statement, but when you're talking about a Stephen King adaptation that actually captures the spirit of the source material, I get it.
Survive, and you will walk away with $1 billion.
Glenn Powell is the MVP. Here's what's consistent across basically all these reactions. Glenn Powell's performance is being universally praised. Jimmy O from Joe Blow noted that The Running Man features Glenn Powell in a performance that only continues to prove what the actor is capable of. And that's coming from someone who's also pointed out the film might run a bit long with a few too many characters. So even when critics had minor quibbles about pacing, they weren't touching Powell's work. What's wild is that even Arnold Schwarzenegger, who played Ben Richards in the original 1987 film, weighed in on Powell's performance. According to Powell himself, when Schwarzenegger watched the film, he said, "He was so excited that the Stephen King book we put on screen. It's really the first time Stephen's version has been properly adapted." The tone question. Is this controversial? Edgar Wright's The Running Man is described as action-packed and entertaining. Think high-energy, bombastic blockbuster. But the source material is genuinely dark. King's novel is about a man so desperate that he's willing to be hunted and killed on live television. It's a commentary on poverty, desperation, and how entertainment has become desensitized to human suffering. It's supposed to be disturbing. The 1987 Schwarzenegger film was basically a fun action movie that happened to be loosely inspired by the book. And King hated it because it lost the message. Now, from what critics are saying, Edgar Wright has managed to thread the needle. But here's the potential controversy. Some people are worried about whether adapting such bleak source material into a mainstream action film sanitizes the message. One of King's most haunting elements is the ending of the novel, which involves a hijacked plane crashing into a skyscraper. As you can imagine, post 9/11, that imagery is incredibly sensitive. It's possible Wright changed that ending, which could upset book purists. But honestly, that might be the right call given the cultural context. Stephen King's approval is huge. One thing I need to emphasize is that Stephen King himself has actually endorsed this adaptation. King posted on social media that he'd seen the film and called it fantastic. Die hard for our time, a bipartisan thrill ride. Now that's significant because, as I mentioned, King was publicly vocal about hating the 1987 version. The fact that he's giving this one such strong praise suggests Wright actually nailed what makes The Running Man work as a story. King apparently gave the screenplay his stamp of approval even before filming wrap. According to Wright, King told him that the adaptation was faithful enough to the book to keep the fans happy, but different enough to keep me on my toes. A film for our time. What's also interesting is how relevant The Running Man feels right now. The novel was written in 1982 about a dystopian 2025, and now we're actually in 2025, and the themes feel uncomfortably prophetic. We're living in an age where reality TV dominates, where people are willing to do increasingly dangerous things for social media attention, and where there's genuine concern about media manipulation and government control of information. One critic noted that Edgar Wright's adaptation is set to align more closely with the original novel's tone, diverging from the 1987 film featuring Arnold Schwarzenegger. Wright has indicated it reflects a reality that is a few minutes to the left of our world, suggesting a familiar rather than futuristic setting. And I think that's exactly why this adaptation is potentially controversial. It's too real. When a dystopian film from the early 80s suddenly doesn't feel like fiction anymore, people start asking uncomfortable questions. The minor complaints. Now, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the few criticisms that did come up. Some reviewers noted that the film runs 2 hours and 13 minutes, and there are quite a few characters in the ensemble cast. Coleman Domingo, Josh Brolin, Lee Pace, Michael Cera, William H. Macy, and more. Jimmy O mentioned that it runs a bit too long with a few too many characters. Still a crowd pleaser judging from the screening I attended, but honestly, this is pretty minor stuff. Most critics didn't seem to have issues with the runtime, and the large cast is probably necessary for a Stephen King adaptation. The man writes sprawling stories with ensemble casts. These are the kind of criticisms that are inevitable with any major film adaptation. So is this Hollywood's most controversial revival? I don't think The Running Man is controversial in the way people typically mean. Like, it's not going to offend massive audiences or spark culture wars. What makes it potentially controversial is that it's taking a genuinely dark, intellectually challenging piece of dystopian literature and actually respecting that source material while packaging it as a mainstream blockbuster. It's controversial because the film's commentary about spectacle, desperation, and the dehumanizing nature of entertainment is relevant in 2025, in ways Stephen King couldn't have predicted back in 1982. When you watch a film about people willing to die on television for money, and you're living in an age where that doesn't sound completely fictional anymore, that's unsettling. That's the kind of revival that makes people uncomfortable, not because of explicit content or offensive material, but because it's holding up a mirror. Marvelous verdict. Looks like a promising project. November 14th can't come soon enough, honestly. Based on these early reactions, Edgar Wright has delivered something that respects Stephen King's vision while also being genuinely entertaining. Glenn Powell sounds like he's giving the performance of his career, and the film apparently manages to be both thrilling and emotionally grounded. The fact that Stephen King himself is enthusiastic about this adaptation, and that even Arnold Schwarzenegger is endorsing it, suggests that Wright found the sweet spot between honoring the source material and making a film that works as cinema. Is it going to be controversial? Yeah, but in the best way. It's going to make you think while you're being entertained. The film releases November 14th, and based on what critics are saying, this is shaping up to be one of the most talked about adaptations in recent memory. Let me know in the comments what you're most excited about with the film. Are you a book fan? Did you watch the 1987 version? Do you think Edgar Wright is the right person to bring this story to the screen? If you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.